Man, good evening, everybody. So it might get a little chilly in here. They bumped up the AC for me because I was so hot. I was like, oh. I don't know if it was conviction or what, but man, I was hot. No, I'm just kidding. So if you want to open up your Bibles this evening to Job chapter 40, if you sort of just happened in here, we are at the very end of the book of Job. And so chapter 40 and 41 in the next week, we will end with chapter 42, but sort of wrapping up this next couple weeks. Remember, Job has been suffering in sort of an unimaginable way, in a lot of different ways that we can't imagine, not just the fact that he's lost 10 kids and business and reputation. The only person he has left in his life is his wife, who's telling him, just curse God and die. His 3 friends come over and they listen and they're doing really well. And then they were just like, Job, you're full of baloney. He's outside of town scraping off boils that he has with clay. He's in the garbage heap. He says, my name has become synonymous with suffering. He says, God, the hardest part for me is I know you're good. I know you're gracious. I know you're above all things. I just don't feel like you care about me. And I don't know how to deal with that. And remember, we've gone back and forth over chapter upon chapter upon chapter where his friends say, hey, Job, here's a real issue. Your kids all died because you're full of pride. And Job rebuttals this. No, Job, here's a real issue. And it gets worse and worse as we get down. And last week we walked into now where God finally speaks up. God finally says something. Job has taken the time to say, hey, I'm not sinless, absolutely, but I am upright. And I've tried to do what's right to everyone, whether to the widow or to the orphan. But as he goes on, he begins to ask these questions and make these pleas and these accusations. And remember, he starts off with saying, Lord, I wish I was in the courtroom with you. I wish I could just take my case to you. I wish I knew what the accusations were. I wish I knew what your case was, because then I could work through this with you. And at that point then, as we get into chapter 38, 39, 40, 41, and 42, we need to realize that when God is doing this, where God says, okay, Job, if that's what you want, you really want to go into the courtroom, okay, well, here are the prerequisites. It's kind of like Job said, if I was God, if I had your job, this is what I would have done. Right? And that's never a safe place to be. And I don't ever read this section. I've read, again, I've read till I was sick and I had a headache. I mean, you can read to ad nauseum people talking about things that God is doing in Job, things that God is not doing in Job, Job's friends, who they are, who they're not, who Job is, who he's not. I mean, over and over, it's so confusing. And at the end of it, you have one group that says God is being very kind here, saying, Job, I need you to understand this. Because if your warped view of who I am continues on, and you're suffering after I've just said, remember, we know behind the scenes, we read chapter 1. If you're saying, when I've said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? He's more upright than anybody else in the world. There's nobody like him. And Satan is challenging, is God worth worshiping outside of the things that he gives us? Now, does God give us good gifts? Yes. Should he? He doesn't have to. I mean, as a parent, right? I love my kids. I have to clothe them, give them a house to live in or some form of shelter, right? And food. I could throw them bologna on the yard and say, here you go. I could give them a tent. And yeah, would it be kind? No, but they'd be surviving. Because I love my kids, I want to see them flourish. I want to take them for ice cream. I want to spoil them. And one of the hardest things as a parent, and this chapter really, these next few chapters, really, if you're a parent, man, just like some of this stuff, it just hits really hard, is when Job is confronted with the idea of who he thinks God is, and he has, in his theology, everything is right, but in the practicality, things have kind of gone askew. Does that make sense? Like his theology of who God is and how great and the majesty of God, he has all that down, right? I mean, he knows all of his eschatologies and all the ologies that there are that you can make up, right? He knows the names of God. He knows God's characteristics. But the practical way that God is working in his life, it really has gone off course. And some of it absolutely is because of the pain. Some of it is because he has friends that really aren't being friends. Job, we know you're suffering, and man, you are down in the dumps, literally. Here, let me make it better. Wow, you are lame. Because that's what everybody wants to hear when they've lost their family and everything else, right? You totally deserve this. And God is going to bring him to this courtroom. And I really, truly, and again, everybody, this is America. You have the right to be wrong. That's our slogan, right? You have the option to have your own view of who God is, but for me, very practically, this is what I know of God. He is kind. He is gracious. The times where God says, I would explain this to you, but you're not going to understand it. And we looked at that a couple weeks ago with Habakkuk. Habakkuk is like, God, what are you doing? This doesn't make sense. How can you allow this to happen? Your people are worshiping other things. They're in immorality. And God says, I am going to do something. What are you going to do? Habakkuk, Habby, if I told you, you would not believe it. Try me. Okay, I'm going to bring all of you into slavery, and I'm going to lead you away with hooks. It's going to be horrendous and horrible, but it's going to be the only way you're going to learn. It's for your survival. And what does Habakkuk say? Wrong number, I don't think. That's not how you work, God. No. We were looking for a little tiny spank, right? We were actually talking about this the other day. You know, our kids, I remember one time Laura calling me saying, hey, I need you to come home. Why? What's wrong? She's having some attitude problems with the kids, you know, when they're not interceding for the nations. They had this one little thing. And I said, okay. And I get home, and Laura said, you tell your daddy what you said to me. And sheepishly I hear, I asked Mommy if she could spank me, not you, because I don't like your spanks. And I was like, now here's the thing. I don't like spanking either. I never have. First time I ever had to not spare the rod, I wept afterward. But they were just like, Daddy does it better than you do, Mom, and I don't like that. But there is something about this twistedness, and we've been going through this on Sunday. There's this twistedness that's within us, right? This iniquity that we already have. And it doesn't matter how much of God you understand or how long you've been with him, there's still always going to be this twistedness this side of heaven. And so God is bringing Job here to this courtroom after 37 chapters of silence. And he says, Job, I know you want a lot of answers, but here's the thing. I'm not going to give them to you. Because the reality is I'm the answer. You're looking for answers to specific issues, but if you look at me, then you will understand who I am. So it's not, again, the why sort of fades away, and God is going to say it's the who. And we started a couple weeks ago where God started with these 77 questions, where he points out these things to Job, you know, oceanography, you know, cosmology, zoology, meteorology. We left off last week with a little bit of the zoology and animals, and God has given him this final challenge here. So that way, when we get to chapter 42, did anybody read ahead to chapter 42? Any eager people out there? So chapter 42 is heavy, and it's awesome heavy, though. You know, it's heavy in the way that a 12-ounce steak is heavy. Do you know what I'm saying? It's good. You're looking forward to it. But God is going to bring these two different animals, and these two different animals here get more print than the other 10 animals right before them. And there is something spiritual, we might say, in this that we'll kind of look at part of this. But again, as we go through this, you know, we're going to talk about Behemoth. There's a lot of opinions over who Behemoth and Leviathan are. This is what it says. God made them. Okay, first of all, I'll tell you my distorted opinion. You can have yours. God made them, which means they're real at one time. They're not mythological, okay? They're not unicorns. So God made them. He's the creator of all creation. We're told about Leviathan. It says that God made it. That's important because, yeah, they're probably extinct now. You know, but remember, Job is one of the oldest books in the Bible. It's before the Torah. It's before the law. It's before Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's before the priests and prophets, before Moses. It seems like it's after the flood because that's pretty fresh. His friends have brought that up. But not far after the flood, Job is going to live over 200 years. And Job, as he shares with chapter 40 here, God is going to answer Job's heart. Not the question that he's asking, but he's going to answer Job's heart. We see this all the time with Jesus. A young man comes to Jesus, he says, "What must I do?" Right? I mean, what are the greatest laws that there are? And, Jesus tells him, love the Lord your God, your parents, on and on. They have this dissertation back and forth. And then what does the guy say? All these things I have done since my youth. Literally, since I was an infant, I have been kind to the Lord and my parents, and I've always worshiped him. Okay. Now, right there, Jesus probably should have said baloney, right? Sorry, Greek, bolonia, right? There's no way this is true. So what does Jesus say to him? Hey, you're asking all these questions. Here's the thing. I'm going to answer the heart of the issue. Go and sell everything you have. Come and follow me. He gives this guy an opportunity to follow him and to be with him. And it says the young man went away brokenhearted. Why? Because he had much. The heart of the issue is not what he was asking. The heart of the issue was his heart was involved in worshiping something else. And God here is going to do that. I love the fact that God is so kind enough to do that. It says that it's like a whirlwind. Again, I don't fully comprehend or understand. I don't think it's like a tornado. But there is something to get Job's attention, to get his friends' attention here. It's chapter 40, verse 1. It says, "Moreover, the Lord answered Job and said, shall the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? He who rebukes God, let him answer." So the structure is interesting. Literally, it says, will the reprover or rebuker of the Almighty instruct him? It's a rhetorical question, right? The answer is what? No. But he is saying, okay, Job, I'm all ears. I've listened to what you said, and I'm all ears, but I do have something to say. It says, then Job answered the Lord and said, behold, I am vile. We might say insignificant. It literally means no weight, or I'm a lightweight, right? Job is confronted with who God is, and he goes, oh, hey, I'm a lightweight in comparison. What shall I answer you? Again, behold. The structure, the sentence structure of this is that Job is astonished all of a sudden. Now, he's been speaking to God, but God says to him, okay, Job, here's the reality. Who can contend with me? Like, who should I explain myself to? And Job is shocked. He's like, I never thought about that. You're right, I'm a lightweight. What do I know? Right? I tell my kids all the time, there's going to come a time where you think I am one of the dumbest human beings in the world. I went through it, right? I was surprised my parents could tie their shoes at one point in my life. The older I got, the more kids we had, I was like, wow, they are the smartest people I have ever met in my life. I remember one time, I was 8 years old, 9 years old. I got in a skirmish at school, right? We can call it a fight because it wasn't really a fight. And I remember I came home. My dad, principal had called my dad. Hey, Julian got in something at school, and we're going to put him in detention for the week. My dad came home early in his uniform. Hey, what's going on? What happened at school today? What? I don't know. Math, English, just learning, trying to make our society better, Dad. Nothing happened. Nope. Had an apple for lunch. No, I can't think of anything. Nothing. He didn't go to and I remember him saying this. He didn't go to the principal's office. Now, at that point, he's being kind and gracious, right? Like, please, just do this for me. Tell me the truth. Nope. And I remember as my punishment, when my dad told me what was going on, I thought, oh no, he's going to murder me. He's going to murder me, bury me in the backyard. He's going to murder me. And he said, I'm really disappointed in you, and I just don't think I can trust you. And then he left my room, and I was like, that's it? Yeah, okay, I can deal with that. My cousin lived 2 blocks away. And I remember saying, hey, Dad, I'm going to go down to Nicholas's house. He says, okay, hold up a second. Let me grab my shoes. I go, okay. I walk. He starts walking behind me and following me. I get there. That's weird. He's like, well, just give me a call before you come back home. Okay. So he follows me back home when I'm leaving. Next day, all my friends, and this is the 90s or maybe late 80s, we're going to go to the mall big time, okay? Going to go to the mall, cruise the mall, and my dad said, I'll drop you off, and then I'll come pick you up later. Great. Halfway through the time they're at the mall, somebody's like, dude, isn't that your dad? I'm like, yeah, that's weird. He's probably just getting something. It's a big mall, whatever. We start going to the food court. My dad sits down with us. I'm like, what are you doing? And he looked me in the eye and he said, hey, I can't trust you anymore, so until I can trust you again, I just have to be by your side. And at that time, I was like, you are crazy. Have I done that same thing with my kids? Yes. I'm like, man, that man was a genius. Because you know what? I either got better at lying or I didn't lie anymore. I tell you that. So there is some truth. He's confronted with who God is. He's overwhelmed. He's shocked. He said, I am insignificant. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand over my mouth. The idea is, as he says that, is I want to say more, but I'm going to stop myself. So Job's being very honest. I want to keep talking, God, but I realize that I probably shouldn't. Have you ever had that moment where you have to restrain yourself from saying something stupid? Don't look at somebody else. Once I have spoken, but I will not answer. Yes, twice, but I will not proceed any further. So yes, I want to speak more, but I'm not going to speak. Job had asked his friends earlier, I remember, hey guys, put your hands over your mouths. I'm tired of hearing what you're saying. Right? He's always against these guys. And God confronts Job, and now Job says, oh, I need to do the same exact thing. The Message puts it this way. I think it's funny. It says, I'm speechless and in awe. Words fail me. I should have never opened my mouth. I have talked too much, way too much. I am ready to shut up and listen. And that really is the idea of it. Right? Have you ever kept digging the hole worse and worse? Anybody married, right? Digging the hole worse and worse and worse. He says this, then the Lord answered Job out of a whirlwind and said, and again, we're not exactly sure what that looks like. There is restraint over the fact that a whirlwind brings destruction, but it's not destroying anything. So maybe it's speaking of God's power, maybe it's to get Job's attention. We're not sure, but it says, now prepare yourself like a man. We might say brace yourself. Okay? God says, okay, Job, put on your big boy pants here. We're going to go through some stuff. I need you to understand something. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Would you indeed annul my judgment? Would you condemn me that you may be justified? And again, we can all do that, right? We go to the court of fairness. God, this isn't fair. I'm going to tell you what, you don't want God to be fair with you. You lose in that situation. You want God to be gracious and kind. Job had been criticizing what he perceives God is doing, only to make sure that everybody knows that he's a good guy. He said that over and over again. I've helped the orphans and the widows. I've been kind. I've been a good judge. And now he's going to be confronted with who he really is. And he says, God is going to say to him, here's the hand that I have. You don't think that my hand can deal with this, that I know what I'm doing. So I'm going to give you a very practical way to understand my strength and my discernment over yours. Have you an arm like God? Or can you thunder with a voice like his? We looked at this on Sunday, right? The arm of God that brings salvation. Like, are you willing to do that, Job? All these things that God has done. And he starts off again with this challenge here. He's going to open up his eyes to a perspective here. Job, you think that you can reign in the sort of moral jurisdiction, but you can't even handle the natural world, the things that I handle very easily. It's the conversation I have with my little Zeph all the time. I love that kid. He is passionate. But over and over and over again, I'll say, hey, Zeph, come help me do this. And as he's helping me, he'll be like, that's not how you do that, Daddy. Okay, well, let's just watch. I've done this before. Let's just see how it, I don't think you're doing it right. We should look on YouTube. That's what he always tells me. We should look on YouTube, right? Why go to school? We have YouTube. It's free, Dad. And I remember we were putting together a weed eater motor. And he goes, Dad, that's not how that, and I said, okay, Zeph, you show me how it's done. Not in malice, but you show me how it's done. Well, I don't even know what these parts are. I know that. I want you to be here so you can understand who I am, so you can see, you can learn from this. And again, God is no different than that. So God gives him this challenge. He's going to challenge Job's perspective. He says, then adorn yourself with majesty and splendor and array yourself with glory and beauty. So can you do these things? And remember, God's speaking out of this whirlwind. Disperse the rage of your wrath and look on everyone who is proud and humble him. So look around, Job. Look on everyone who is proud and bring him low. Tread down the wicked in their place. You're going to see that he uses the word proud 2 times. It's a challenge here because the very end of chapter 41, his main challenge is going to deal with pride, which we'll look at hopefully Isaiah chapter 14 here this evening. Why that's so important, why God is wanting to deal with this pride. Hide them in the dust together, bind their faces in hidden darkness. Then I will also confess to you that your own right hand can save you. It's interesting, again, pride is the original sin of Satan, Isaiah chapter 14, and we'll go through that here in a while, but that's where Satan has his 5 I wills, right? Lucifer has his 5 I wills. I'll be like the Most High, I will do this, I will. 100 years later, in Ezekiel chapter 28, God answers him. God says, no, I will. And I will humble you, and I will bring you down. And there is a connection here with pride. Now, the reason why that's so important is Job doesn't know the background, right? The backdrop. He doesn't know chapter 1 like you and I do. So God is saying, hey, there's an issue of pride here. Not just your pride, Job. That's not the issue here. But the prideful one is coming against you. And I chose you to go through this. I said there is no one like Job in the world. I mean, can you imagine if God said that about you? And there is nobody as legit as this one person. There's nobody that loves me like this person. And as he begins to deal with pride here, this backdrop of pride, again, Lucifer, the anointed cherub, we're told, led worship. All of the world's problems started with a worship leader. Lucifer is envious of Adam because Adam and Eve are what? Created in God's image and likeness. When you read Isaiah chapter 14, that's what Isaiah wanted, or that's what Satan wanted, Lucifer wanted, to be made in God's image and likeness. We're told that for a little while we're made lower than the angels, but that was not the original intent. And one day that won't be the way it is. Not more important, but we as human beings are made in God's image and likeness. That is a gift that God has given to mankind. When you listen to Lucifer again in Isaiah chapter 14, I will be like the Most High. God creates Adam. Satan is saying in Isaiah chapter 14, I will do all these things. I will have this fellowship. I'll bring myself up like God. Adam is made. Adam is having fellowship with God in the cool of the day. Lucifer is cast out. Immediately he goes after who? Adam and Eve. Because God has just given to them what he wanted but wasn't his to take. He says, hey, you guys should eat this fruit. What is the first lie he tells them? In the day that you eat it, you will be like what? God. That's the thing he had wanted. You will be like God. And again, Lucifer puts that temptation before them. Lucifer in his unfallen state there, again, Ezekiel chapter 28 tells us that he goes and he's envious of mankind. Pride had lifted him up. Job doesn't understand all of that. God says, are you able to make the proud, take them and cast them down, Job? You think that you have moral jurisdiction, but I want to explain something to you that this thing that you think you understand, you fully don't understand. You don't have the full reality of it. So he gives them this challenge here in verse 15. He says, look now at Behemoth, which I made along with you. He eats grass like an ox. So he says, hey, let's look at this creature. Now, I'll tell you what some people say. I'm not going to say that it's dumb, what some people say. Some people say this is a hippo. When we read through this, at the end of this, you tell me if you think this is a hippo, okay? Some people say it's an elephant or a wild buffalo. We'll see in the numerous certain things here that raise a question. I don't understand how that's possible. What's interesting is when it says behemoth here, for you Bible students, it literally is a feminine plural. So this is, when it says here, behold the beast or the behemoth, it's an intensive form of the word. So some of you are lost here. Focus. Pull back in. You didn't know you were going to have school today. The idea is behold this beast, which is the beast of all beasts. This is the alpha beast, is what God says. Okay, Job, you say you have a good grip, you have a good handle. I want to put this beast above all other beasts right in front of you. And he's going to move on through here. What's interesting is right after that, he's going to say, he eats grass like an ox. All of those are masculine singular. So he must be talking about a certain behemoth that Job knew about in his neighborhood. Right? So hey, we're going to talk about the beast upon beast. Like that one in your backyard, Job. That one that you're in awe of. Okay, let's describe the hippo here in verse 16. He says, now see his strength in his hips and the power in his stomach muscles. He moves his tail like a cedar, and the sinews of his thighs are tightly knit. When he's talking about cedars, these are cedars of Lebanon, guys. These are 200 feet tall. The idea of swinging, to me, it's like, how is it? A hippo, little tiny tails, right? I've watched Winnie the Pooh, I know. Little tiny things in the Jungle Book, little tiny tails. But the idea is the behemoth itself, when it says it has this tail like the cedars, it means it loves to splash it back and forth. Right? There's this thundering with this tail again, rules out all these other animals that phony baloney say it is. He says his bones are like beams of bronze and his ribs are like bars of iron. He is the first in the ways of God. The idea is not only is he strong, but when he says he's first in the ways of God, the idea is he's the largest. Right? He's the largest of all land creatures here. In my mind, if you read King James, it'll say dinosaur. In my mind, or dragon. In my mind, this is a dinosaur here. There's a great book by Gish that talks about dinosaurs and men, where they found human bones, dinosaur bones, human footprints, dinosaur footprints in the same strata in the earth, right? But of course, we never lived with them, because we're 9 billion years old. So he says, only he who made can bring near with a sword. God says this, hey, Job, can you destroy this guy? This gigantic animal. The first time I went to India, they have elephants everywhere outside of the main cities. And I'd seen elephants at the San Diego Zoo before, and I knew what an elephant looked like. But man, you see an elephant just walk past you, and it doesn't care that you're there. And it gets its trunk, and they just kind of move stuff out of the way. It is terrifying. Kind of the idea here is this gigantic, muscular animal. He says, Job, you can't stop him, can you? Surely the mountains yield food for him, and all the beasts of the field play there. Again, and there's no hippos in the mountains, but he says he lies under the lotus trees and in the coverts of the reeds in the marsh. We'd probably say the swamp is a better idea of that. And the willows and the brook surrounding the lotus trees cover him in their shade. Indeed, the river may rage, yet he is not disturbed. He is confident. Though the Jordan gushes into his mouth, though he takes it in his eye and one pierces his nose with a snare. He says here he loves moving his tail back and forth. He can go up to the high places. He can, he likes to go down to the swamps. Even the River Jordan is like a little tiny drinking fountain to him. I don't know what kind of creature this is. I just know I don't want to find that kind of creature, right? I don't want to know what that creature is. I love strange things. I was going to sit down and talk about cryptozoology nonstop. And when I say that, I know people are like, oh, Bigfoot. I knew it. We're waiting for aliens. This church was way too good. I knew it. No, that's not what I'm saying. Cryptozoology has found gorillas. Cryptozoologists found gorillas, right? We all believe in gorillas. The giant squid, they just found a few years ago, they found this one worm. Years and years you had sailors say in the deep sea, this gigantic sort of worm would come up with one eyeball. And then every time they tried to grab it, it would just dissolve. And they were like, baloney, you guys need more oranges, all got scurvy and you're, hallucinating. And then about 5 to 10 years ago, one washed up on shore and they took a picture of it. It was 30 feet long. It was like 3 feet around. It was translucent and had one eye, one gigantic, nasty mouth. But the UV rays just dissolved everything. There was nothing left in like an hour and a half. So again, I'm not saying that this is Nessie, okay? So please hear me when this is not Bigfoot or anything. I know whenever I talk cryptozoology, people are like, oh man, one of those. That's not what I'm saying, okay? But I do think there is a reality. You read some of the things about, the biggest open area between the Congo and Zaire is something like 35,000 square miles. It is one of the most populated for animals and one of the least areas that we know anything about. We have stuff all throughout history. Alexander the Great came to India. He said there was tribes there in India that worshipped a dragon that lived in a cave. You have the Mokele Mimbe, which again is this 50-foot-long snake that many explorers have seen continually on and on and on. I don't know what this is, whether it's extinct or whether it's still around. The reality is I don't really care. All I know is at one time, during Job's time, it was there. Job is challenged with behemoth, how whatever it is, it's huge. God says this, Job, you're criticizing me and my judgments. You're criticizing me and my understanding. Can you take the proud and humble them? You can't even take something that's natural, that's powerful, and humble it. And when we think like, oh, it's hard to tame a lion. You know what the hardest thing in this world to tame is? The heart. It is one of the hardest things. Your heart and your mind are one of the hardest things to tame. I would much rather try to tame a lion, right? Well, yes. I had to think about it for a second. He goes on now. He's going to talk about this sea creature here. He says, can you draw out Leviathan with a hook or snare his tongue with a line which to lower him? So can you tame him? Leviathan, it literally means twisted or the twisting one, this twisted monster. Some of your translations might say crocodile. That takes more faith than I have to think this is a crocodile. Whatever it is, it's pretty scary. Leviathan is talked about in Psalms, in Psalm 70. I'll read you a couple of these. In Psalm 74, because when people say, oh, these are mythological animals, apparently the psalmist didn't know this. Because Job talks about it, Psalms talks about it, Isaiah talks about it. Psalm 74, verse 14, it says, you broke the heads of Leviathan in pieces. You gave him as food to the people inhabiting the wilderness. He's, again, speaking about, Asaph here is speaking about the power that God has. That they're having Leviathan steaks, which is what Job is going to talk about too. Psalm 104 says this, Psalm 104, 26. I was going to mark these. It says, there the ships sail about, there is a Leviathan which you have made to play there. Right? That's terrifying. I love the ocean, but it's terrifying when there's sea monsters. I love watching Shark Week on Discovery. Don't ever want to see a shark in the water. He goes to the behemoth, which is the largest of all land animals, then now here to Leviathan. In Genesis, in the creation story, where God is speaking about all these things that he makes. Some translations say that he made the great whales. The Hebrew word is tannin. It literally means great water beast. It's 15 times used in the Old Testament. 3 of those times it's whales, 3 of those times it's serpents, 8 times it's dragons, and 1 time it's sea monster. At the beginning of time, there was sea monsters. Okay? I don't know any more than that, and heaven will have to figure out what it is. Some people say, oh, this is a whale or something like that. Doesn't quite make sense. He says, can you put a reed through his nose? So can you domesticate it or enslave it or lead it? Or pierce his jaw with a hook? Will he make supplications to you, and will he speak to you softly? So will he be completely submissive to you? Will he make a covenant with you? And will you take him as a servant forever? I love God's divine sarcasm here. It's so funny to me. He says, will you play with him as a bird, or will you leash him for your maidens? God says, hey, Leviathan in the water, that gigantic sea monster, would you play with him, or would you put a little leash on him and then show all your girlfriends? Man, the Lord is awesome. He says, will your companions, verse 6, make a banquet of him? So will they be making Leviathan steaks? Or will they apportion him among the merchants? Will they be selling him off? Again, making kebabs, making steaks with him. Put him on a leash and show him to the girls, show him to the world. Verse 7, he says, can you fill his skin with harpoons or his head with fishing spears? So can you kill him, really, is the idea. Lay your hand on him and remember the battle. Never do it again. Indeed, any hope of overcoming him is false. Shall not one be overwhelmed at the sight of him? God says, hey, you make that mistake once. Okay, people have tried. They made that mistake once. Verse 10, no one is so fierce that he may dare steer him up. Who then is able to stand against me? If nobody could stand against Leviathan, Job, then how do you think you can stand against the creator of Leviathan? Who has preceded me that I should pay him? Everything under heaven is mine. So, Job, hey, I don't owe anybody anything. Like, I made all this. I'm in charge of this. And again, I don't think this is harsh that he's trying to say. I think he's trying to give Job perspective. And sometimes those hard lessons are done in love and care in order to give us perspective. I made everything, Job. I will not, verse 12, conceal his limbs, his mighty power, or his graceful proportions. The graceful there literally just means huge. Who can remove his outer coat, and who can approach him with a double bridle? So who's going to ride this bad boy, right, and domesticate him? What is that movie, sis? Water Horse? Where that guy found Nessie and started riding him? Not true, guys. Not true. We know that now, okay? This is terrifying to me. Verse 14, it says, who can open the doors of his face with his terrible teeth all around, right? That's like a Arnold Schwarzenegger terrible alien movie right there, right? Like, who can do that? His rows of scales are his pride, shut up tightly with a seal. One is so near another, there's no air that can get between them. They are joined one to another, and they stick together and cannot be parted. So you can't even get through his scales. His sneezing flashed forth light, as if this isn't bad enough. And his eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. So some try to say, again, this is a crocodile. When we go through this burning and fire, they say, oh, like a crocodile when it comes up from the water and blows. And I've never been this close to a crocodile, so I don't know. But when it blows, it says that it sometimes can give off a mist, and then you can see a rainbow through the water and refracted light. You can believe that if you want, okay? If you believe that this is a crocodile making rainbows out its nose, that's what you can believe. He says, his sneezing flashed forth light, and his eyes are the eyelids of the morning. Out of his mouth go burning lights, sparks of fire shoot out. Pretty self-explanatory to me. Again, God makes this. He says, verse 20, smoke goes out of his nostrils. That's where some people say, oh, it doesn't really mean smoke, it means steam. If you see a crocodile steaming, it's still an issue, right? So, but the word really is smoke. He says, as from a boiling pot and burning rushes, his breath kindles coals, and a flame goes out of his mouth. Dude, right? I mean, that's what we say there. Again, some try to say, okay, well, it's not a crocodile, it's a whale. That doesn't even make sense to me. is, again, verse 22, he says, strength dwells out of his neck and sorrow dances before him. When it says sorrow dances before him, it literally means this in the Hebrew. It means fear or terror dance in front of wherever he goes. It means wherever he goes, people are dancing in terror. Anybody here ever seen a whale? You ever been so terrified by a whale that you thought, wow, I might need to change my underwear? No, right? They don't hand that out on those whale tours at all. Crocodile, maybe if I saw him shooting rainbows out of his nose, right? But there's something here. Again, fear and terror are before him all the way. It reminds me a lot of, we the kids and I do this thing, and Laura will watch these, like, they're not even like B movies. They're like Q movies. They're like so bad that my kids could make a better one on their iPod. But there was one about these blind, like prehistoric sharks stuck in these caves. And of course, they're like, hey, let's go underwater with these caves with enough oxygen for half an hour. What's the worst that could happen? And you're just like, wow, they're all going to die. But we watched it anyway. It seems sort of like one of those sort of things, where it's just like, in the movie, you know what I'm talking about, where all of a sudden it gets really quiet. Like they're all fine, they're talking, then it gets quiet, and you're like, oh, somebody's dying. Somebody's going to die. That kind of is the idea here, is wherever Leviathan was, people were dying. I want to say this. Whatever this creature is, every ancient culture has on record some sort of fire-breathing creature. You can believe that or not, that's fine. Egypt, Babylon, Greece, Rome, England, Ireland, Denmark, China, Japan, Aztec, Peru, the Native Americans. Every single ancient culture. And I'm talking about even within more what we consider modern history. Henry Morris, anybody's read any of Henry Morris's stuff, he talks about different capabilities of dinosaurs that we're unsure about. Leonard Mueller, who's probably one of the, at one time, he's really old now, but one of the leading DNA researchers, was talking about just even some of the cavities within dinosaur heads, where they believe that there was like the bombardier beetle, that shoots out the acid, it smokes as it's shooting it out, that they had these cavities in their heads that they believe some of them held gas, so that they could, we talk about dragons like, all right, come on, I've seen that one with the Night Fury, I know that cartoon. No, there is something to this. I don't understand it because I wasn't there. But again, this was during Job's time, when somebody will say, well, dinosaurs were around, 7 gazillion years ago, or whatever the new number is now, and humans were only, 1 million years ago. It's so funny to me because I was reading through something from last week that we didn't talk about, but it was talking about the sun, where God is, talking about meteorology and all these things moving together. And, the sun is losing 400,000 tons of mass per second. I don't know if you can quantify how big that is. That's a crazy good diet. You back up that fire 100,000 and the oceans are boiling, okay? So obviously there's nothing living in it. You back that up 1 million years and the sun is touching the earth. It doesn't make sense at all. All that to say this. There was some sort of sea serpent. People have talked about it. I don't want to get all weird and freak you out over the sea serpents or anything. They're not in Lake Como, okay? Unless maybe that's where they ended up. We don't know. Some of the stuff is old. Some of the stuff is current. If you are weird and you want that, I can give you a list of some really good stuff, but I won't read through it. But again, we have Nebuchadnezzar writings. Nebuchadnezzar wrote about it in Babylon on walls and tablets. Alexander the Great wrote about it. Pliny, the historian, wrote about it. I mean, that's more modern history for you and I. You have stuff between, 1700s. You have one Japanese biologist that in the 1980s, took these sketches of it, went to the Smithsonian and talked to people about it. And they thought he was crazy until they were like, wait, this guy actually, he knows what he's talking about. So Whether they're around or not, I don't know. Hopefully they're not, but there was one at one time. Verse 23, he says, the folds of his flesh are joined together, and they are firm on him and cannot be moved. His heart is as hard as stone, even as hard as a lower millstone. When he raises himself up, the mighty are afraid because of the crashings that are beside themselves. Though the sword reaches him, it cannot avail, nor does spear dart or javelin. He regards iron as straw and bronze as rotten wood. An arrow cannot make him flee. Sling stones become like stubble to him. Darts are regarded as straw. He laughs at the threats of javelins. That is terrifying, right? To have a dragon laughing at you. His undersides are like sharp, pot-sheared. Some people say that just means like a fin. Maybe we'd say whatever it is, they're sharp. And he spreads pointed marks in the mire. He makes a deep boil like a pot, and he makes the sea like a pot of ointment. So just everywhere. He leaves a shining wake behind him. So there's some sort of slime or something next to him. One would think that the deep had white hair. It's the sort of an idiom of saying that he stirs up so much foam, when he's around. On earth, there is nothing like him. So that's pretty self-explanatory, right? Because we still have whales. So on earth, there's nothing like him, which is made without fear. He beholds every high thing. He is a king over all the children of pride. He's a king over all the children, or literally over all the sons of pride. As we look at this, again, very interesting, because outside of these animals, God is saying, hey, first of all, Job, you want to deal on the very moral, spiritual level. Here's the practical side of things that you don't understand or you can't contain. There's something that is personified here in the characteristics of especially Leviathan here, and these two monstrous creatures. And I want to read you this section out of Isaiah because this being so fresh, this makes sense to us. Isaiah chapter 14 with the fall of Lucifer. In verse 12 it says this, how you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of morning, how you are cut down to the ground, you who weaken the nations. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven, so I'll have position. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, I'll have power. I will sit on the mount of the congregation, I'll have praise. On the furthest side of the north, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, so prominence, and I will be like the Most High. Yet you shall be brought down to Sheol, to the lower parts of the pits. Those who see you will gaze at you and consider you, saying, is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook kingdoms, who made the world as a wilderness and destroys its cities, who will not open the house of the prisoners? So there's going to come a day that will come where we're going to say, this is it? This is Satan? Right? One day we're going to look at him and go, this dude? This is the guy that we were so scared about? God answers him back about 100 years later in Ezekiel chapter 28. And he says this. In verse 12, he says, you were the seal of perfection. So he was a handsome devil. Come on, guys, that was funny. He was a handsome devil. Oh, my goodness. We'll just keep it on there for the people listening to the tape. They're laughing right now. Full of wisdom, perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Remember we talked about this, Adam and Eve being made in the image of God. And every precious stone was your covering, sardius, topaz, diamond, beryl, onyx, jasper, sapphire, turquoise, emerald, and gold. The workmanship of your timbrels and pipes was prepared for you on the day that you were created. And you were the anointed cherub who covers. I established you, and you were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of the fiery stones, and you were perfect in the ways from the day that you were created till iniquity was found in you. By the abundance of your trading, you became filled with violence within, and you sinned. Therefore, I cast you out as a profane thing out of the mountain of God, and I destroyed you, the covering of the cherubim in the midst of the stones. Your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. You were corrupted. You corrupted your wisdom for the sake of splendor. Thirdly, he says here, I cast you to the ground, and I laid you before kings that they might gaze at you, saying, this one. You defiled your sanctuaries and the multitude of your iniquities and the iniquity of your trading. Therefore, I brought fire from your midst. I devoured you. I turned you into ashes upon the earth in the sight of all who saw you. All who knew you among the peoples are astonished at you. You have become a horror and shall no more be forever. There is something of pride here, and we'll look at a little bit of that. But all of this is going to culminate because in this last chapter, in chapter 42, all this is going to culminate where Job's eyes are going to be opened up. God is going to answer Job, not by explanation, right, but by revelation. So you that have been here this whole time, walking through this, God is, through revelation, is going to understand and explain something here to Job. Job is going to be restored. Some wonderful things. Job will be set free from all these things that have been binding him. So be reading ahead, one chapter, and then we're done. Finish the book of Job, amen? All right, let's pray. Lord, we thank you just again for your word. Thank you so much for the gift to be able to walk through it. I know, Lord, it's hard when we have seasons and times like Job, and yet we read through these sections where we realize that we have such a little handle on the practical, physical realm. And how could we ever think that we could take full control over the spiritual realm, Lord? And I thank you again for, as we start walking through some of these things and some of these personifications and looking back and forth between these creatures and what you're speaking to Job, and the fact that in the end you have power over everything. Lord, and you're asking Job to trust that you are able to deal with this issue. Job, as his heart is saying, I wish I could just overcome and conquer. God says, you can't conquer these things that are very practical in front of you. How could you conquer this great beast in the spiritual realm? And I thank you, Lord, that the same is true for us. And yet, you say that we're more than conquerors in Christ Jesus. So we're already on the parade of victory. Lord, and we don't fight for victory. We fight from victory, Lord. Our warfare is not against flesh and blood. It's spiritual things. But it's a victory you've already given to us. And so I thank you that you are mighty and that you are powerful. Thank you for getting us so close, Lord. And if you tarry, that next week we will finish up the book of Job. We thank you and we love you. And just thank you again for this evening. And all God's people said, amen.